This is Terms of Reference Podcast number 155.
Legacy cities, at a very high level, are cities that have gone through a industrial period of greatness and then a period of sustained population decline and a series of economic challenges associated with it, and are now perhaps as many as 100 cities around the world working to figure out how to build on the legacy of the manufacturing base to try to figure out how to join the digital economy as a catalyst for a new and hopefully positive opportunity for folks in the community.
This is Terms of Reference. I'm your host, Stephen Laddick. As you may have noticed over the past few months, I've been talking more and more about the social sector. As I'm sure you'll all have assumed, this has been intentional on my part to begin to reach out beyond my comfort zone of humanitarian aid and international development to the wider community of social actors. People who consider themselves social entrepreneurs, philanthropists, and even intrapreneurs who see opportunity within their existing companies and organizations to make change that will both serve those in need, but also improve our prospects for human flourishing. It's in this context that I'm excited to introduce you to Lev Gonick, the CEO of DigitalC. As you'll hear in our conversation, Lev is passionate about how technology can be used as an enabling platform to bring change to legacy cities. Now, like me, you may ask what exactly is a legacy city. Here's how DigitalC frames it. Many communities that were built on a 20th century manufacturing base now face the challenge of transitioning to a digital economy. Communities everywhere need strategies and practical programming that supports this transition. So again, as you'll hear in just a minute, places like Cleveland, where Lev lives, were once the pinnacle of modern civilization. But now they find themselves with realities that are more akin to sub-Saharan Africa in terms of individual outcomes like infant mortality or higher education. And while it comes out clearly in our conversation, I don't think we could have a better guest on the show to talk about the needs of legacy cities and how powerful solutions can be created. From 2001 to 2013, Lev was Chief Information Officer at Case Western Reserve University, and his leadership helped create the Case Connection Zone, catalyzed national initiatives such as US Ignite, which was launched by the White House Office of Science and Technology Planning, and GigU. As you can imagine, this work has resulted in Lev being recognized and awarded for his achievements in numerous places. I know you're going to love this show about how Lev's team is helping people in need from Cleveland to Morocco by helping to build new civic agendas, introducing new technologies, and open access to the promise of big data. I spoke with Lev in Cleveland. But before we get started, a quick word from our sponsor.
The Terms of Reference podcast is sponsored by International Solutions Group, helping to improve the social impact of governments, UN agencies, NGOs, and companies for more than 10 years. Visit ISG online at www.theisg.com.
Hello, Lev. Thank you so much for being on the Terms of Reference podcast today.
Thanks, Stephen. Great to join you.
Lev, you are a fantastic new addition to what our typical guests here, in that in our pre-interview conversation, you told me you just were coming back from Dublin. So you are a world traveler, but the focus of your organization is in Cleveland, in Ohio. And so I was about to say you're not a world traveler, but that's just not the case. I apologize. Where do we find you sitting today in Cleveland?
I'm in my home office. It's with a nice view of the backyard, and I actually, although I live in suburban Cleveland, I happen to have 5 deer roaming in my backyard, looking to be eating my early planting of flowers and tomato plants, which was clearly a mistake because they're having dinner.
That's the best beginning that we've had so far. I've never had anybody say, "Yeah, well, there's some deer eating my garden." That's fantastic. Looks like you need to get one of those little sound devices that keeps them away. At least that's what my mother-in-law uses. You are the CEO of an organization called DigitalC, and as we do on this show, why don't you start by, rather than having me butcher who you are, why don't you tell us about what DigitalC is, what your focus is, and sort of what your passion's all about.
Oh, well, again, thanks for the opportunity to join you and your listeners to the podcast. DigitalC was formed about 18 months ago as an effort to catalyze the use of technology for community impact in legacy cities like Cleveland. And legacy cities, at a very high level, are cities that have gone through a industrial period of greatness and then a period of sustained population decline and a series of economic challenges associated with it, and are now, perhaps as many as 100 cities around the world working to figure out how to build on the legacy of the manufacturing base to try to figure out how to join the digital economy as a catalyst for a new and hopefully positive opportunity for folks in the community to gain new opportunities, to build new middle classes, to build new skills, and the like. And our organization is really focused in on both the strategic work in cities like Cleveland, engaged in trying to help choreograph conversations around a new civic agenda that leverages technology for community impact, and then very practical programs of activities, which I look forward to sharing with you today. And we have found, just before our conversation, I was actually sitting on another call with colleagues in San Francisco, and as I mentioned to you, I was in Dublin, where again a legacy city that has actually gone through some amazing renewal. And early next month, I'll be in Munich, another city that has done that. So we do work, again based here in Cleveland, but really we feel that there is a small group of thought leaders around the world that that we seek to join in helping cities and their communities begin to think about the blueprint for moving from the manufacturing economies of the past to the digital economy of today and tomorrow.
Then my next question, you're at a perfect spot for our podcast and the conversation we have. 18 months old, you've just recently overcome the 1 year hump, and this is when it gets real, right? I mean, it's the shine has sort of started to come off of the idea, and execution's happening. But where did this idea come from? Why are you a part of this? Who woke up one day and said, this is something that not only is a need that needs to be served, but we can put together this group? Was it just was it a coffee shop conversation between friends one day, and we're like, let's go do this, or was it the genesis of a much longer conversation?
It's a classic overnight success, about 20 years in the making. And I've been engaged, all over. I've had the privilege all over the world for my adult professional life to be engaged with communities as far back as the mid '80s, so literally 30 years ago now, thinking about how communities in Africa and India and the Middle East can leverage technologies. Obviously, those technologies have changed over time to serve basically the public interest. And for the last 15 years here in Cleveland, I've had, again, through my past, I was recruited to Cleveland to help lead a great research university here in Cleveland. It's called Case Western Reserve University. And my goal in coming from Silicon Valley to Cleveland was to really leverage an amazing community with fantastic 19th and 20th century institutions and organizations who were collectively interested in a program of reimagination and reinvention and renewal. And we sought in the work that I did at Case Western Reserve University not only to provide great digital infrastructure to support the mission of the institution, but to make real one of the true sort of elements of any great research university, which is not only research and teaching, but also community service and community engagement, and to leverage our digital infrastructure on the campus and really extend it to the community around the campus. And at Case Western Reserve, again, like many legacy cities around the world, our great universities are actually situated right in the heart of the urban city, in which over time, we've had the general challenge of town gown, which is, another way to think of it in terms of a motif is, that there's oftentimes a moat around our research universities. And over time, the neighbors don't see the university as a true partner. My goal was to engage with the community to be the best neighbor that a city had in terms of the relationship between a great university and its city by leveraging technology. And we created a kind of prototype, which again I've had the privilege of sharing near and far, in creating a digital infrastructure by building out a community-owned fiber optic network, which extended to over 800 community anchor institutions. Those are like museums and libraries, healthcare facilities, universities, schools, government facilities, as a community project, and we realized the power of sort of collective reimagination. And about 3 years ago, I began sort of seriously thinking what would come next. And about a year and a half ago, what came next was DigitalC, an effort in which I spun myself out of the university, left the university as the vice president there to lead this nonprofit organization, which was chartered to really catalyze all that we had built, which was really a utility. And although we had, I think, interesting stories around the way the institutions had managed to leverage the new digital infrastructure for their missions, we all felt that the time had come to really think about how we could begin to impact people living in the city, whether they were longtime residents of the community or, as we've now begun to focus, particularly supporting the underserved parts of our community, looking at people, men and women coming back from service as veterans, those reentering the community from prison, working with what we call SNAP recipients. Those are recipients of the subsidized programs for meals and for welfare, most of them in Cleveland being single moms, and also juveniles who are timing out of the various welfare and juvenile systems that are out there. In a city like Cleveland, that's not a small part of the community. That's the invisible near majority of the community. And much as the Global South has problems around infant mortality and the like, there are many literally wards or sections within Cleveland whose infant mortality rates are equal to the most difficult and challenging infant mortality rates in countries all around the world.
That's a fantastic introduction. Where I'd like to know next is, to take us from that 30,000 foot view to maybe something very specific, because you spoke about the university as a central hub within the urban center of the city. I love the visualization of sort of that moat that gets built around the city or that finds itself around the city. And then, reaching out across that moat to reconnect the university to the city. What's a specific initiative, like either with a community center or a library or some other focal point outside the university where, you've engaged these youth or you've engaged these people who have, are either not connected to digital solutions or maybe how your digital solutions are reconnecting people to the community and opportunities like that?
Sure, Stephen. I mean, again, like any legacy city, while there's a Chamber of Commerce story about, this new shiny buildings and all kinds of economic renewal, there really is a very significant part of our legacy cities which really have not had an opportunity to join the digital economy. And in Cleveland, well over 40% of the city's residents do not have a wired internet connection. And so early on, as an example, just to the north of this great research university is a neighborhood called Glenville. And there is really not only a challenge with respect to digital access, but we have some of the world's best known healthcare institutions like the Cleveland Clinic and university hospitals right in that same area around the university. And again, as I've mentioned, there are all kinds of challenges with access to healthcare, certainly healthcare literacy, access to good after-school programs and the like. So one of the very first things we did was from the university is we actually offered a very early demonstration of how a university could extend its internet access to connect parts of Glenville. And we worked with a senior citizens computing center run by a woman by the name of Wanda Davis to actually connect her computing center to the internet. In its past, it really was a computing center to teach people how to use the Microsoft Office Productivity Suite, and there was a time when that did not include actually getting on the internet. And in their cases, because they could not get on the internet, they could not afford to, and there wasn't good infrastructure. So we literally connected Wanda and the Ashbury Senior Citizens Community Center to the university network. And that then created not only great opportunities for that community to learn how to get on to the internet as well as the Office Productivity Suites, but also gave our students a chance to do service learning opportunities. It gave our researchers a chance to actually engage with measures of community health care. We had a chance to run a number of pilot projects on energy and energy management in that community, all because that community was now connected and in the immediate shadows of the university. And those are all a very practical set of examples where in this country, when we had a very large federal stimulus program run by President Obama following the 2009 crash, when the Undersecretary of State for Commerce announced a $7.2 billion program to build out digital infrastructure across the country, he actually came to Wanda Davis's Senior Citizens Community Center and on the curb made that announcement to the country. And it is a really good example of the kind of early work that we did as a community to create a proof point that connecting the whole city and all of the citizens created value, which Wanda and her colleagues were able to share. And we've got, thankfully, lots of really good stories about individuals whose lives have changed with relatively modest investments, but with a sense that there was a real need to, again, kind of reimagine the urban centers of a legacy city as really centers for innovation, rather than as cities, parts of the city that whose future was really only what a developer could see, which was largely about raising those great parts of our city and trying to put up new shiny shopping malls and things of that sort.
Hey guys, you're about 25 minutes into this episode, and if you're finding value, can you take a moment right now, just open up iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, whatever it is you're listening to, and give us a rating? 1 star is great if you don't like what you're doing, but 5-star would be even better, right? Click on subscribe so you never miss an episode. And also, if you're really enjoying this and want to share it with others, can you click on Facebook, click on Twitter, share the episode, share the podcast, and help others to get in on the game of making aid and development better. Now, back to the show.
So what are the practicalities behind it when you say that you extended the university's internet and you actually, you basically turned on this citizen center, you put them online? Was that you went in and you installed a router, or was it you actually laid fiber to it, or what's the totality of what you bring to the table to turn that on?
Yeah, the answer is all of the above and more. Again, this takes us all the way back to a period. And again, when we started this program with Wanda and her colleagues was in 2005. So this is a very long time ago in relatively internet time. So what we did back then is we actually extended 802.11, which is now very much commonly understood as Wi-Fi, which is widely available. At Case Western Reserve University, we had gigabit fiber to the pillow in all of our dorms, which I implemented it with my team in 2002, 2003, and all of that produced an abundance of broadband availability. And we just extended an aerial antenna and connected it with fiber down into our machine room in one of our residential towers, and basically propagated and rained down wireless and connected it to Wanda's computing center, as an early example. But we're just finishing up a program now, if you fast forward, providing a gigabit wireless connectivity to Cleveland's public housing communities, in which and men's homeless shelters, which is using much more robust and high speed connections with what is basically what we call fiber extension services with a new technology which is called millimeter wave, which is a very robust technology, which means that here I'm talking to you and your listeners from the suburbs of Cleveland, where I may be getting something like 10 megabits down and 2 or 3 megabits up. In public housing in Cleveland today, it's a symmetrical service, which means that people are not only able to consume, but they're also able to co-create at 30 megabits symmetrical, which is probably in my case 3 times better than I have here in the well-to-do suburbs. And that's because the technology has matured, and we've, again, leveraged all of that investment that we did together as a community when we built out this community network infrastructure that I referred to earlier.
I don't know if this is going to be a curveball question, but maybe it's maybe it goes right to the heart of the work DigitalC is doing. Why isn't a telco doing this? Why aren't the typical organizations that we would associate with laying fiber or providing communication services. Why is this a priority, especially given the fact is, maybe we need to have a better understanding of how large this population is? Like what's the size of the communities that are living in these legacy cities? Why is this a problem you're having to solve and it's not seen as an opportunity for a traditional commercial enterprise?
Right. And, I do think that it's a big question that you're asking. It's not a curveball, though. It's a fundamental challenge in the United States in general, because unlike most countries around the world, we don't actually have a true national policy of building out the next generation of infrastructure to take us into the 21st century. The truth is we have a huge amount of variation around states, and within states, there's a huge variation around cities. And if you're an incumbent telecommunications provider or cable provider, you have basically your own corporate strategy about where you're going to be making investments in the states and in the cities. And within cities, again, cities like Cleveland, and again, you could add many other cities like Buffalo or Pittsburgh or Detroit in our immediate neighborhood, which is the immediate cities around us. The truth is that incumbent providers don't have unlimited capital dollars to invest. And when they do make investments in new generation infrastructure, there's a huge amount of market pressure to show robust returns on investment. And that means that even if they are investing, hundreds of millions of dollars, most of the investments in the United States are around wireless access, supporting wireless access. And there's been relatively little investment in fiber optics. And so while in the United States you could wait for your incumbent provider, or you could wait for Google or someone else to come in, I think the model that we and here in Cleveland, and I think, again, dozens and dozens of other cities that have on their own, or perhaps some of them inspired by the work that we've done in Cleveland, have basically said, this is really about a self-reliance model in which we have to take our future into our own hands. And, there is room to at least try to create a more competitive marketplace. And so when we got involved in beginning to lay out our fiber optics infrastructure, the truth is we created for the first time in our legacy city a competitive environment, which led to both the cable company and the telecommunications company to be actually investing in Cleveland and creating much more competitive price points for their products, because there was actually competition. And so we think that that's a good thing. And, we were able to create a blueprint to suggest essentially a new high water mark for what was acceptable in Cleveland for investment. And so, again, I think it's a continuing, we talk about it at DigitalC in terms of the importance of thinking about a new civic agenda. And the new civic agenda really is about, the community realizing that technology needs to be added to the civic agenda, and access is one very important part. It's not the only thing that matters. In fact, it may be just a table stakes conversation, but legacy cities all over the world are challenged because they do not present a quick return on investment where, again, if you're, the chief financial officer of a large global telecommunications company, you're highly motivated by your shareholders or by your board to actually show a robust and quick ROI. That's the reality, and there's a long way to go in Cleveland and in other legacy cities. Tomorrow, we actually have a special committee of city council talking about digital inclusion. I don't know, Stephen, if you will know, but in the United States, this is Digital Inclusion Week. And we are not only talking about access, but we're also talking about digital literacy training. And we're talking about how to create compelling use cases based on the experiences of men and women who've succeeded through our programs and programs of our partners in delivering real value. And that's the kind of thing that the truth is, no telecommunication company really is based on telling this, the story of a woman in Cleveland that, again, whose story will be told tomorrow at the City Hall. She'll be there doing testimony. She, like many other people in our city, were victims of the subprime crisis. She lost her home. She ended up doing work in one of our large healthcare systems as a health aide, a glorified well, I mean, obviously it was respectable work, but she was making just barely above minimum wage. She actually went through the digital literacy training program that one of our partners called Connect Your Community runs. We worked with her to present her new skills and certificate to HR at this large healthcare provider. And, she was able to get herself a new position as electronic medical records entry specialist. And she's now making $25 an hour. She's actually just purchased a new home. Her kids now have high-speed internet at home, and, they're able to participate in online homework assignments and other things like kids out in the suburbs are. And that's a story that only, I think, a city and its community that has a new civic agenda can tell that kind of a compelling story. And it's really not a story that is particularly meaningful to a large global company because, its success is measured largely on ROI and not on return on community values.
It's fantastic. Where my mind goes, and I think maybe I hate to speak for our listeners, but where I'm thinking the minds of our listeners would go is that the headlines of today, and I guess it really depends on where your focus is, but at least for me, it would seem that everybody's got a mobile device in their hands. Even in the most destitute places in the world where I've traveled in sub-Saharan Africa or here in Southeast Asia or whatnot, you can go to the furthest reaches and there's at least feature phones, if not smartphones, in a very good chunk of the population's hand. And so the concept of digital literacy as an issue is increasingly difficult for me to wrap my brain around. And so where I'm trying to formulate the question around is do you focus, or is your focus on the community writ large? Do you find that the people that you're serving more are, adults and, the older citizens, or is it really, youth aren't even able to step up to the plate yet just because they don't even have access, and it's a bigger fallacy that I have, obviously, that technology is becoming more and more accessible and more affordable.
I do think that, again, there is a broad myth about the pervasiveness of smartphone technology. I can only speak from the data that we have here, which, is, based on our engagement in, very neighborhood, we might say kind of grassroots work. It's absolutely true that there's a status symbol associated with getting a smartphone. And so you actually see a fairly broad adoption of smartphone technologies in Cleveland. But the reality is that, again, we have really good survey data on this, that upwards of 40% of the community actually do not have data plans with their smartphones. In other words, it's a status symbol to have the newest Samsung or iPhone device. But most folks who are choosing between groceries, clothing, and having to pay for healthcare out of pocket, can't afford $80 or $90 a month for an unlimited data plan.
This comes into sort of the Instagram culture, right? Of
I
can go out and rent a car for a day, or I can go out and find a way to get a bunch of cash to throw on a bed and take a picture with it, or something like that, to steal from Gary Vaynerchuk or whatever. And sort of put that image out into the world. But at the end of the day, I really don't have the foundation and the knowledge and the infrastructure to really support what I'm putting out there in the world.
Yeah, again, I think that is the reality. Again, I don't think by any means Cleveland is unique. We have done a survey, and there is a report that was just released by the Communication Workers of America that did a survey that really shows that there's significant parts of the population, and it's not just the aged, the infirmed, or the disabled. There really is an economic challenge for people to meaningfully join the digital economy. And it's not just the ability to acquire a device, it's the ability to pay for and to have a compelling reason to actually create a priority for the payment. And I think for those of us, especially, your listeners, we have found compelling reasons over the last period of time to simply prioritize the investments to make it possible for us to participate as global citizens. But I do think that, that is not the reality for a significant part of what is, a kind of fourth world, which is, kind of the urban, the true reality of urban life in legacy cities. I think, our effort has been not only to shine light on that reality, but then to develop both a strategy and then a series of programs for delivering value. We just finished a hackathon with the Cuyahoga Metropolitan Housing Authority on the realities of life living in public housing. And again, it's a significant portion. The average annual income of people living in public housing is under $15,000 a year. And you can do the math. That's just over $1,000 a month. How would you justify putting 10% of that against, a single smart device for the monthly data plan, if there weren't a compelling reason to really make use of it? And the truth is that on its own, there isn't a real compelling reason. And that's why we're working with our hospitals who want to deliver a more efficient and more just-in-time set of health, education, and intervention strategies. And, we're looking and working with them to help underwrite some of that investment so that people can take advantage of it. We're working with publishers of school textbooks where every kid, they want to have an electronic ebook or something like that to do their homework. But if, kids go back home and they have no internet access, that doesn't really help the publishers or the school system increase student success. So we're working with publishers and the school districts to find ways to help underwrite, home connectivity. So there really is I think a compelling reason to realize that the world is quickly dividing into a significant portion of early adopters who do not think twice about the shiny new communication toys and tools that we use. And I would think actually an equal size for whom it's still beyond the pale of availability. And then there is, again, a growing group of folks in the middle who are finding that if they have a compelling reason, perhaps can make that choice. But, if you're making $15,000 a year living in public housing and your kid, and you're moving oftentimes 2 and 3 times a year just to sort of find a way to get closer to your work, hoping that you don't have to pay for your public transit because that's more money out of pocket, and trying to find a place to do your urban farming experience because you can't really afford to go to the grocery store. I mean, that's not just a marginal handful of people in, again, urban life in legacy cities. And the truth is that even in great cities that we think of technology leaders, as I found out talking to people in San Francisco this afternoon, there are real challenges in those cities. And again, it's not just the aged, the infirmed, and the disabled.
This conversation is going in such a direction that I did not expect. It's absolutely fantastic. You've thrown a lot of big numbers on the table, especially when it comes to building out these infrastructure, and you were talking about the telcos investing hundreds of millions of dollars in order to stand up or dig down. I'm not sure what the term would be, fiber optics and those kinds of things. What's your funding look like to do this? I mean, how does DigitalC ultimately put these projects out on the street and then sustain them for any amount of time? I know obviously you're only 18 months old, but what's your funding look like? How do you get people to pay for this? And is it massive amounts of money, or is it small investments are making the huge difference?
Well, I think fundamentally our success thus far has been because we do have a strategy that involves pitching a very big tent and inviting everyone in our community, and the truth is global technology players who have new technologies that they want to introduce into the marketplace. We do have a compelling set of challenges that we invite, again, the community to help solve together. It involves not just providing solutions to the underserved. It involves working with the underserved themselves, as we did with the Metropolitan Housing Hackathon, where residents were talking about their challenges and their aspirations and dreams of they and their children being able to join the digital economy, so that in creating that big tent and creating a governance model for both building out sort of the underlying plumbing, the digital infrastructure that we shared earlier in our conversation, our funding model involves kind of sort of 4 key strategies. One is grants to do specific programs, which has involved the Sisters of Charity, which is a healthcare provider, or the Cleveland Foundation, where they literally would like us with a Metro Health, which wants people to become digitally literate for their healthcare records, investing in the form of grants to deliver programs. There are programs where we are actually working with technology companies who are doing demonstration projects with us. And that's, again, my 30 years experience knowing kind of who's working on emerging new technologies and being able to help them frame a story about why they would want to invest in pilot new activities. And again, these are companies from Asia, from the Middle East, and from across the United States and Canada who are coming to make investments here as demonstration projects. We've also been relatively successful with competitive grants through the National Science Foundation. There is a program called US Ignite, whose board I have the privilege of serving on, that works on next generation applications and services. And we've been able to secure some generous funding through those kind of competitive research grants and the like. And then we have a fundamental core funding. The fourth element really comes from our ability to realize a significant flow of ongoing support from having built out that big fiber optic network that I shared with you. And we enjoy some of the proceeds of that, which we, again, invest directly in our programming staff and in our program delivery. So those are the four actual funding sources that we have. But it all feels, we are very much and try to operate as a bootstrap, fairly agile organization that has, again, kind of worked on strategy, worked on neighborhood technology hives, or embedded in the neighborhoods, and really trying to help government and nonprofit organizations like the United Way or the Cleveland Water Alliance, or organizations like, again, the healthcare systems, or even the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame here, really try to figure out how to use their data. They're now all on this big network that we've created. How do you begin using data for good? And that's another very big part of what we do. We have a big data repository that we support, and that does produce some recurring revenue for doing data analytic work. So, again, I would say, we are constantly reinventing our business model to leverage the core funding, but to look to new opportunities that address voids in our marketplace where we can create value. And for value, we mean addressing needs, and again, like data for good, trying to help solve the community's challenges by helping organizations who do direct services do their jobs better and hopefully with more impact to the community.
Is there a tipping point moment that you've identified as an organization, or maybe you've seen over the last 20 or 30 years of your career, where investing in a legacy city like Cleveland, for instance, the woman you described earlier at the Citizen Center, connecting her and connecting that community, is there a point when you can say, hey, we've crossed over the chasm, or we've bridged the digital divide, or whatever, where this community is now connected and they're now able to step into and participate in this other previously inaccessible portion of the economy? We can kind of walk away, it's sort of self-sustaining. Does that make sense, or is that? Oh yeah. Take me through maybe an example of that.
Honestly, and fully transparently, I think it remains aspirational. I think that there are, a sustainable strategy is not just about putting the connectivity into place. It is clearly about creating the training environments and the opportunities. We have a program called Restart, which is really an effort to provide people who now have connectivity an opportunity to do sort of formal skills development that really gives them a chance to show their employer or to a prospective employer that they have the skills because they have both a good, robust access to the internet. We have programs with recycling programs from corporate Cleveland to put computers in those households, a program to help kids who go to the school district here to have laptops or tablets or even PCs at home that they can, so there isn't as much of a homework gap. But, I do believe that it does take a village not only to raise a child, but it takes a village of the entire community to realize that, it is a program of continuous engagement and trying to be an authentic partner, all of which is to say, I don't have an example of a neighborhood in Cleveland that has sort of gotten, to and over the chasm. I think there are a lot of communities approaching a point in which there is a growing probability that they will have success. And I think success is not just about being able to walk away. Success means the kids are graduating closer to the average of the suburban communities, that their healthcare outcomes are, again, more likely to reflect the profile of the better-to-do suburbs, that the air quality in their homes is better because we're monitoring them just like we can monitor some of the better neighborhoods in the region. I think those are measures of success, and those are prerequisites to a sustainable environment. There is a lot of opportunity for gentrification that happens, but I think here in Cleveland, and again I think in legacy cities, the goal is growth, or gentrification with equity, or growth with a sense that it's not just for the kids graduating from college who are looking for cheap housing to come in and displace the neighbors. Our real goal is to make sure that we have ways of sustaining the communities and respecting and honoring their legacy. That is definitely a work in which we in the technology community really are just a small part of a much broader effort, led by our community's leaders.
With that said, what are the major roadblocks that you usually come up against? Is it community resistance? Is it policy and government, resistance? Or is it just funding issues? Or what are your typical challenges, or what are some of the curveballs you get thrown on a regular basis that make this anything but a slam dunk?
I think two things stand out, again, from our experience, again, not only in Cleveland, but in other cities that we've helped, with strategy work. The reason that we have legacy cities is, partly beyond our control, which is to say there's a global economy, there's disruptive technology, there's changes in where manufacturing happens. We're all very cognizant of that reality. But there's another piece of that, which is that leadership in our communities, our leaders, not only our elected officials, but our civic leaders, are leaders of the manufacturing economy. Our newspapers have, reporters that are still reporting on the steel industry, even though, we've gone from over 30,000 steel workers to under 3,000 steel workers. We have philanthropy in our community that is still largely set up and structured and run by boards who are still challenged with figuring out how to make sense of technology because it's largely been disruptive. Part of it is simply, a generational piece of it, but part of it is, again, their wealth, their volunteerism, and their visions have been shaped by a very different historical era. So I do think that is a general challenge that we've seen everywhere in the legacy environments in Europe and in North America in particular. I think the other piece that's a huge challenge, beyond sort of that leadership quotient here, has to do with the choreography of how do you build a new consensus when you don't have a leading technology company that is naturally, helping to build that consensus, whether you're in the Pacific Northwest or, in Silicon Valley or in Austin, Texas. You have some incredibly powerful new centers of wealth, which are, very quickly building a consensus. And the consensus is not just for the leaders. It's really for the community itself, who don't really have a collective vision of what we could be. And that's why earlier on I was saying that, we see the challenge really begins with a reimagining program. And that's, again, not just for the elected or the civic leaders. That's for kids who, we work with every day. We have a great program called We Can Code It, which is, or other programs, Cleveland Codes, where, this is really about helping kids imagine a future where, if you're a young man in Cleveland, that you don't think of yourself like your dad or your grandfather or your uncle who aspired to be a mechanic or to work at the Ford plant, but you could imagine participating in the digital economy. It's that kind of reimagining effort that's tied both to in-school and out-of-school activity, that we think is part of the bigger challenge around helping the community reimagine and then helping the community execute against that new vision. And that is easier said than done in any community, but I think in particular challenging in the legacy city because we've internalized our history, and oftentimes we have a very hard time reimagining anything other than what we've been.
How do you go about connecting? You were saying you've traveled to
Well, I think it's an emerging community. Again, I think we've all realized that the power of the technology that we've all been part of is profound, and it's not only profound in creating new wealth, it is profound in the idea of creating a new civic agenda. And I think all around the world there are individuals and organizations, emerging civic technology organizations that aspire to and are creating models, and we are sharing them. And we have the privilege of participating in those dialogues around the world. I just share with your listeners that Cleveland is hosting a global gathering called the Meeting of the Minds. It's an organization run by a team out of the San Francisco area. And though they don't always meet in legacy cities, in fact, most of the time they're meeting in the Bay Area, they are particularly attuned to trying to make sure that the digital economy in all of its potential is meaningfully connected to the real priorities of communities all over the world. And this coming October 23 to 25, if listeners to the podcast would like to check out Meeting of the Minds online, they'll have a chance to sort of see how this community in the making around the world is coming together. And again, we'll have the chance to host, we hope, and we're quite confident, hundreds and hundreds of people who will have their own stories to tell. And we will, we look forward to hearing those stories, learning from them. There is also a community of practice around data for good that we are committed to learning from and hopefully contributing to. There is a community of practice around neighborhood technology hives, where we're trying to create new community centers for the 21st century that builds on the tradition of the role of churches and public libraries, but is really a space for the community to both learn about, participate in, and join as either entrepreneurs or service providers, in the digital economy. Almost all of these models have been developed in legacy cities, because I do think that the challenges of today create enormous opportunity and innovation, and the constraints are, I think, the core catalyst for innovation, and there's no place greater is challenged by constraints than the legacy cities. And my travels over the years to Africa and to Asia have shown me more about what is possible than any visit to Silicon Valley.
I always end our conversations here with two questions, and I'm almost remiss to ask them simply because I feel like you are a brain trust for not only this movement but for a host of other pieces that we like to talk about here on Aidpreneur. But who do you pay attention to in order to not only stay relevant and stay up to date, but just to watch trends and to see what's coming down the pipe, or to see what's working? Are there particular magazines, particular Twitter feeds, particular blogs, or other sources of information beyond obviously the communities that you work in that are important you think other people should check out?
Again, I would point people to Meeting of the Minds. It's run by a foundation called City Minded. Although it's not the only source that I use, I have selfish interest in making sure your listeners hear it again. And in fact, it is a series of contributors, blog posts from all over the world that is very, I would say, relevantly curated by the team at City Minded. And I do commend it to your listeners. I think that there are, again, many other sources that I read on a daily basis around. In the United States, we have a coalition called the National Digital Inclusion Coalition. Again, it focuses in on the challenges of access to the underserved parts of the community, and there's all kinds of lessons that we learn from each other in that environment. There's an organization called Broadband Communities that we're active in. The organization that I referred to earlier, the team from US Ignite, will give your listeners a chance to sort of see the leading edge efforts for healthcare applications and for education applications that are leveraging. And I always think about how to translate those very high-end solutions, to the inner city. That's certainly an important piece of it. And then, I have peers and mentors, that I've followed who either have blog posts or, who whenever they are sharing, articles, I'm always reading and resharing. There are many Twitter handles out there that, I watch on TweetDeck. The good news is that in the civic tech space, there are lots and lots of individuals who are worth following. I think the most exciting part is that it's beginning to aggregate, and I think we are beginning to create critical mass, and which organizational capacity is now being built around, a few good ideas that individuals have had over the years, and that certainly gives me, a lot of optimism about our ability to actually move from ideas to programs, execution, and hopefully making a difference.
The last question I have is one that seeks to sort of take you outside your box, because you are leading an organization that deals with strategies and community engagement in such a broad terms. This may be a little difficult, but what is it that you're excited about that's coming down the pipe, or something that you've known of that you'd like to tell others about? It's a chance to sort of give a shout out to either a new innovation, a new process, a new technology that you think is going to have a big impact here maybe in the next 12 to 24 months that others may not know about. Is there something like that that's on your radar that you think others should know about?
Well, 3 quick things. I mean, for those who are interested in disruptive access, I think our experience in building out this millimeter wave technology solution, it's not a panacea. It doesn't work everywhere in all situations, but it's a very cost-effective, very robust solution that if you have good fiber in your community, you can actually extend your fiber footprint, and it for a very, very disruptive price point. So I commend that. I think in terms of the opportunity to create compelling and meaningful solutions for healthcare and for education, as the communities do become connected at very high speeds, I think the world of virtual reality and augmented reality, probably more than 18 to 24 months, but probably from 36 to 60 months, in the next 3 to 5 years, I think we're going to begin to see applications that take us well beyond the gaming environment to being able to create immersive environments to help people understand their health and wellness needs, their education and training needs. And I think that'll be much more robust than, text-based or web-based solutions. And I think that that's certainly important. And then I think the whole world of blockchain, the whole idea of how we create secure and auditable ownership of intellectual property and shared community property, both for sharing, but also for making sure that there is a auditable trail. I think that we've yet to see the most robust demonstrations of how that technology can be utilized in support of the public good. And I think all 3 of those are technologies to keep an eye on, and hopefully not only keep an eye on, but hopefully your listeners will be able to be among those leading those innovations going forward.
As with basically all the guests on the show, I could probably talk to you for the next 2 hours, but we have to bring it to a close. Thank you so much for being a guest on the show today, and I wish you all the best.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks for your interest, and then good luck to you and to everyone that you touch through your podcast.
You've been listening to the Terms of Reference podcast from Aidpreneur.com. Subscribe to us on iTunes.